Welcome. I'm so glad that you're going to join me in my little corner of YouTube today. You know, with Valentine's Day being right around the corner, I thought maybe we would do some simple little hearts. We'll be using watercolor and learning how to control the water, thus controlling the paint. So let's see if we can create some beautiful little hearts. Okay, we're going to start with showing you kind of what I had in mind that we would do. Here's one that I did the other day. It's not finished. It just has the 3 little hearts on it. And then here's another one that I did several months ago. It has some ink on it, some little drawn lines, and some little embellishment up there. So this is kind of what we're going to do today. And how we're going to start out is with our watercolor paper. And this is the watercolor paper that I use. It's not expensive. It's very, very inexpensive. It comes from Walmart, and it's 9 by 12, 140-pound watercolor paper, and there's 50 sheets. And it's really a nice little watercolor paper. It's pretty thick. You can, as you see mine, I'm going to tape it down. It's about $10 or $11. So you can use up a lot of watercolor paper for $10 or $11. It's not precious, and you can use it with your children. You can use it up. You can experiment with it. So this is how I start out, and this is something I learned the hard way. Used to, I would get a piece of watercolor paper, something like this, and do a watercolor on it. And then if it turned out pretty good and I wanted to do a frame, put a frame on it and a mat on it, then I would have to go to a framer and they would have to cut a mat and maybe make a frame to fit this watercolor paper. So after I learned, like I say, the hard way, now I go and find the mat and the frame that I think that this is going to fit in, and then I do the watercolor paper to fit the mat and the frame. So that saves me I could buy a mat and a frame off the shelf. It's not a custom-made mat. So I have a piece of watercolor paper here, and as you see, it's taped down to a board because this watercolor paper does buckle some when it gets wet. So I have it taped down, and that helps keep it straightened out. Now I put the mat that I think I'm going to use on the watercolor paper, and then I use a pencil, leaded pencil or graphite pencil, and I mark around where that is going to be, and the mat is, and then that shows where my boundaries are, and I know not to get out of those areas. So now we're going to talk about, we talked about the paper, and we talked about, here, I'm going to show you my brush. It's called Silver Black Velvet. It's a number 10. Pretty good size brush, holds a lot of water. And then here's my palette. I use mostly Winsor Newton, some Daniel Smith, and some Sennelier watercolors. They're tube watercolors, and I have a limited palette. I like to use a cool red, a warm red, a cool yellow, a warm blue, and a cool blue. And then I can just mix a little bit here. But I'm not going to be mixing very much of the paint on my palette. For this, I'm going to show you how to put the water on and then drop the watercolor in and let it mix on your paper. And that's a really good way to start learning how to do watercolor. Now we're going to do these hearts because it's Valentine's Day, and we like Valentine's Day. Now, if you want, you can draw freehand hearts. That's something like this or this. There's no template involved. They're just kind of sloppy little hearts drawn, just freehand drawing of a heart. Now, if you like that, and I do, that's kind of how a lot of people do it nowadays. But if you want something a little bit more, I don't know, with nicer edges on it or more symmetrical, I guess. This is one I did on Arches watercolor paper, and I used a template for this one. So if you want to do a template, I suggest cutting out a heart, because the hardest part of doing a heart is getting it symmetrical. So just find you a little piece of paper and make sure that it fits on your watercolor paper where you're going to do your heart, and you fold it in half, and you simply draw a heart that you think you might like. Okay, this one may be just a little bit big, but we're going to use it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to just use that as a guideline. I'm just going to go around. And you notice that it's a lot easier to turn the paper than it is to turn the scissors. To open it up and see if you like it. You know what? I think it would look better if this wasn't quite so tall. So I'm going to round off the top of it. And you can just keep cutting until you get what you like. Okay? That's okay. I like that one. Here's one I already cut, so I think I'll use that one. Now, you just need to decide where you're going to put your hearts on your watercolor paper. Now, this is totally a creative thing on your part. You can put them across. You can put them adjacent, diagonal. You can put one here, and then you could cut a smaller heart and put 2 or 3 small ones in there. This technique will work with any size heart. You just have to decide what you're going to do. And if you do one and you get really interested in doing these, then do 2 or 3 of them. Just go back into your watercolor paper is going to be cheap enough that you can just do these all day long. I'm going with a very hard pencil that makes a very light line. Okay? So I'm going to do one there, and I'm going to do, ooh, my heart's kind of big. So I think I'll just turn it sideways and go around, whoop, this one. I don't want to use a dark pencil because I don't want to have to erase. Erasing on watercolor paper is something that you should try your best not to do. When you erase on watercolor paper, and the less expensive the watercolor paper, the more this will be an issue for you. But when you erase, you're going to lift up the tooth on the paper, and when you get ready to put watercolor on there, it'll be rough, and your watercolor won't look like it where you have erased and disturbed the tooth of the paper. The surface is called a tooth. It won't match the rest of the watercolor paper, and you'll be very disappointed. So try your best not to erase anything. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do, we're going to put our water on there. So let's just begin. Okay, I'm going to paint with clear water. Now, earlier today, I washed my brush when I was activating my watercolors. When they come out of the tube, they're kind of thick, so you need to put some water with them and make them kind of fluid. And I have to say that my water has a slight yellow tinge to it, which is not going to hurt anything. I'm not going to leave white paper. I don't need that pure white underneath here. So sometimes that's a good thing because you can kind of see where you've been. You see where the water that you put on there. This is not a hard to see this. You can see that it's shiny. And I'm trying to stay within the lines that I made. Now, it's not to say that I might not do this again and ignore those lines. Use those lines as a guideline. But the cardinal rule of watercolor is your paint goes where your water goes. So if you drop droplets or you come outside the line, then your paint is going to go outside your line. So if you want to keep those lines crisp, then it's probably a good idea to try to stay as straight in those lines as you can. So we're going to paint all 3 of these. You can do them one at a time if you like, but in the interest of time, I'm going to wet them all 3 down. Now you want them wet, but you don't want them sloppy. My work table here is at an angle, so mine will have a natural proclivity to run to the bottom here. And honestly, this has a little bit of tape on the back of it, because if I don't do that, I can't keep it in the camera view. I'm notorious for talking about something I'm doing and it's over here. So I'm trying to do better with that. So I have all 3 of the hearts have been painted with water. You can see, I can pull this up and get closer. You can see the shiny spots on it. It's shiny here, but it's not shiny here. I got a little fiber in there. Now I'm going to put this back down so I will make sure to stay in the camera view. Okay, so I'm gonna wait just a minute and make sure that and there's a little bit of a bubble there. I think I'll just dab that and not take a chance of getting paint in it. Something else I like personally is I like to have a couple of tissues. Now these are off-brand tissues that do not have lotion in them. You don't want to dab up anything on your watercolor with a tissue with lotion on it. You don't even want hand lotion on your hands, because sometimes, especially on the more expensive watercolor paper, that lotion will leave a film on your watercolor paper and your watercolor won't stick where that lotion is, and it can give you kind of a splotchy look that you don't know how it got there, or you don't like it. So see, we're going to start with I think we'll start with a yellow and a orange, red-ish kind of. Okay, so we're just going to drop it in. This might have gotten just a little bit dry on me. So I add some more water. Maybe add just a little bit of yellow or red. See, now that's pooling a lot, and I'm afraid it might run. So I could probably do well to pick this up and let it go, the water go the other way at some point, but I'm going to see how this is going to play out. I can also pull it over a little bit, but just remember that where the water is, that's where the paint will go. Like it just a little bit darker. And traditionally, if you want something to look a little bit 3D, then you can do a little bit darker color on the edges and a little bit lighter in the center. Get that. Drop a little more yellow in there. And if you have a place that you've left white, that's all right too. So I am going to lift this up and let this go the other direction. And you see how it's going down into the tooth of the watercolor paper. That will kind of disappear once it dries. And if your area right here is too wet and it's got too much water in it, it's going to drip off your page. And that's kind of cool too. So since this watercolor is so inexpensive, watercolor paper so inexpensive, do that, try that, make that happen, and see if you enjoy that look. So the next one's going to be some blues and some reds, because I don't have purple on my palette. I'm going to let it mix on the heart. I don't want to make, I did make a little purple with adding a little crimson, alizarin crimson to it, but I don't want it a solid purple, but I did want to incorporate some purple. So now this is dried almost to the point where I'm having to add a lot of water to it, which is okay. You can add too much water if you get to where something's trying to run off. Then you have to be a little more careful. Let's try this color. The colors are still blending on your watercolor paper, which is the purpose of this exercise, is to drop that watercolor on your paper and let it mix on your paper. I'm just going to let that one go. Now the next one, I think I'll do a green. So I'll start with some yellow and pick up a little blue. That's kind of a blue-green. I kind of like that. Let's add a little bit. So I want it to be green. Now I could have just put the blue on there. Let's see what that does. Put the blue on there. And then add the yellow. See how that makes it very interesting. So I think maybe that's how we'll go. I'm not going to use that green that I just made. I'm going to drop it in. It'll find the water eventually. I know I'm probably not supposed to be quiet. I'm supposed to talk all the time. Makes it more, I don't know, does that make that more interesting? It's kind of hard to do watercolor and talk, I find. I think I'll just put a little water in that right there. I like that. I like that splotchy. So basically what we've got here is we've got yellow and orange, yellow and red, which makes kind of an orange. And that's a secondary color. And you got blue and purple, and that's a secondary color. And you got green and blue and yellow, and that's a secondary color. And those are always very pleasing to the eye. So, I mean, if you've got, you know, a couple of places that look to one color, you can still drop paint in. Try not to paint. Try to drop it in. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry. If you want to hurry up to get it to dry, you can always touch it with a hair dryer. But I think I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll come back and finish it up at a later time. So join me for the next one where we finish this up. I'll show you some things that I'm going to do with them. I mean, we can make cards. We can actually just put this on the wall. We can put a frame on it. Now I put these kind of down here close. I could write something across there. I could write this as a birthday gift, as a love token, something for Valentine's Day. Well, we're going to leave that for the final video on painting Valentine Hearts in watercolor. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.